Hello, everyone. We'll just give everyone a few minutes to join in, a minute or two. Welcome on in. Just wait a minute. All right, so we'll let people continue to join in, but let's get started. Just want to say hello and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a virtual event celebrating the publication of Calculators and Cash. I'm excited to be here with you all, and in just a few moments, we'll be hearing from the authors of this book, Marc Colasanti and Alexandra Popa, joined by panelists Bartos and Mirsky. We are so grateful to have with us here today. Just before I turn things over to Marc and Alexandra, I want to mention that we have a discount code available, as you can see here on the left-hand side of your screen. It is CAC Launch, and this will give you 20% off any purchase made on the Canadian Scholars website. And you can use that up until June 17, 2024. I'll also just note that we have free shipping within Canada as well. We do encourage you to take advantage of this great discount available. We will be also taking any questions from the audience for the authors and our panelists at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to make use of the question and answer function through Zoom. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit your questions anytime during this presentation. You may also submit questions anonymously as well if you wish. So let's begin. Please welcome Marc and Alexandra.
Thanks, Leanna. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, if I do this. Okay. So welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the launch of Calculators and Cash. This is a case book designed and geared towards Canadian and United States students. The case book covers a wide range of cases in financial accounting, audit, tax, and finance. The goal of the casebook is to allow instructors to bring a more real-world, practical, case-based scenarios into the classroom to engage students and to make accounting classes more fun. So today with me, I have one of the co-authors of the book, Alexandra Popa. Alexandra is a vice president at BDO Canada in the M&A and Capital Markets Group. Alex has an extensive background in financial due diligence, corporate finance, and business valuations, and she uses this to critically analyze and manage various aspects of transactions. In addition to this, Alex is also a professor at Seneca Polytechnic in Toronto.
Thanks so much, Marc. And yeah, today we're joined also by Marc Colasanti, who is one of the co-authors. He's a partner at a boutique accounting firm specializing in assurance, tax, and estate planning, as well as corporate reorganizations. In addition, Marc is a lecturer at the Schulich School of Business at York University, teaching at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. He was awarded the Seymour Schulich Award for Teaching Excellence in 2020. If you've never used casebooks before in your classes, you may be wondering how you can use them to enhance students' learning and foster collaborative in-class discussions with students. That's one of the objectives of our presentation today. And also trying to help everyone understand the impact that cases can have on positively driving students' learning outcomes. We're going to do this by going through what the casebook offers, looking through some example cases and discussing our experiences and our intention behind cultivating or crafting this casebook the way that we did.
So you're thinking, why an accounting casebook? So what you're going to find in this casebook is a collection of 28 different cases spanning from financial accounting, audit, as well as financial accounting cases with finance issues, as well as taxation issues. So the goal of the casebook is to bring real life application into the classroom setting. So what we found a lot of times is that when you teach theoretical, when you're an instructor teaching theoretical concepts, I feel like that brings the students' knowledge so far. It's until you bring that practical real world experience into the classroom. So the case books vary from different situations, company situations, industries, and the role of the student is going to be a CPA in each of the cases. Now, the CPA, the student CPA is going to be reporting in some cases to maybe their boss, maybe an audit partner, and through there, they're going to have to go and analyze different issues, and they're going to have to conclude on certain issues. Now, another area of this casebook, which we found very unique and very challenging, which is good for the students, is that every single case has unique issues, and these issues aren't as clear cut with a yes or no answer. So what this forces the student to do, it forces them to analyze the alternatives, look at both alternatives, and conclude on an alternative that best aligns with the case, the users, and the objectives. So this is what we like to call gray areas in accounting, where maybe there isn't a clear-cut answer. So you'll find a bunch of these different types of issues throughout different areas of accounting throughout the casebook. So what type of cases can you expect to find in this casebook? So as I mentioned before, there's going to be financial accounting cases, both at the introductory and intermediate level. There's also going to be audit cases at both the introductory and advanced level, as well as there's going to be financial accounting cases with finance-related issues. And then there's also going to be financial accounting issues with taxation issues. So as we mentioned before, the goal of the casebook is to challenge students to think critically, to use problem-solving skills to analyze issues and to conclude on the different alternatives present. So in the casebook, you're going to find that there's going to be multiple alternatives. The student's going to have to analyze both alternatives and then conclude on an alternative, but not just conclude, link it back to the users and the objectives and how that best aligns with the objectives specific to the case.
When we designed the casebook, we wanted to keep students and their learning and their best interests top of mind. So we designed it to empower students to take ownership of their learning and to feel comfortable applying their technical knowledge in classroom settings by creating a casebook that fosters in-class discussions and also helps instructors like us, and we've used them in our classrooms and we've definitely found this, helps instructors make the technical knowledge come alive through real life scenarios and scenarios that CPA students, when entering the workforce, would encounter in various industries that they work in and in various engagements that they might be a part of if they're working in professional services. So this casebook does not reward students for simply reiterating technical content and not really going beyond the technical that was taught in class. This casebook is designed to really help students understand and articulate the so what of a scenario. So for example, if there's a situation where there's some internal control deficiencies and students identify those deficiencies in the rubrics that come alongside the casebook, students will not be given full points for just identifying an issue. They instead will be encouraged to explore the so what of that issue. So what are the implications of having deficiencies in internal controls? And so this is fostered in a number of ways that we're going to go through in terms of how to integrate the cases in your classroom environments. So the first thing that I like to do when I have cases in my classroom is really foster in-class discussions. So either by picking out some questions or some issues from the casebook and presenting them to students and asking them to take a few moments and read the particular question, cultivate an answer, and then have a back and forth. So oftentimes students, especially when it's their first time using casebooks, they might just jump right to the technical solution. Okay, this is the accounting issue, this is my answer, this is why. but they don't really look at, and Mark mentioned this earlier, that in some situations in accounting, we have a lot of gray areas, right? And so our casebook facilitates a discussion in terms of, okay, the pros of going maybe in this direction, and then also balancing that with the pros of going in another direction, looking at all of the factors, understanding all of the implications, and then ultimately deriving one solution that makes the most sense. And so I find when I integrate these cases into my classrooms, students will kind of just have a natural stopping point. They'll say, this is the solution, full stop. And so having these in-class discussions and sometimes breaking up these cases into smaller questions that you can present to students on kind of a piecemeal basis until they get used to or accustomed to the idea of case writing can really facilitate you as an instructor drawing out more of that technical knowledge that you've worked so hard and that students have worked so hard to accumulate throughout the course. The second way that I like to integrate cases into my courses is through quizzes or exams. So you can do this a number of ways. Number one, you can just find one longer case and maybe give students an hour and a half to do it themselves in a classroom case setting. Or you can do a series of cases. So sometimes I like to do back-to-back, like 3 cases, have students write an exam for 3 hours. And then it allows me to take that information back, look at students' responses, cultivate like a common error sheet, understand where are students faltering, where are some areas that they maybe need to improve their technical understanding, or we need to do more of those in-class examples and do the so what and really draw that out of their understanding of practical real-life issues. You can also, and I've done this many, many times, you can also give students cases to read at home in groups and prepare a response. And then the next time they come to class, they will be called on to come to the board and present their solution to the class. And so what I like to do is I like to take a step back at that point. I usually do this kind of towards the end of the semester when students have, used cases often and have become comfortable with the rubrics and the expectations of the case. So you kind of take a step back and you allow students to have a discussion amongst themselves. So you make the expectation clear that the students sitting in the audience are expected to ask questions to the students presenting their case solution. And so I find that this really draws a lot of really constructive and positive discussion where students are picking up on issues that maybe other students wouldn't have thought of. And they're having a really collaborative class discussion, and then I'll jump in and just add some technical knowledge or try to like gear the discussion in the right direction if they're not getting to the solution. And so this is all made very possible and very easy for instructors with the comprehensive case solutions that we've provided. So the rubrics have exactly what the assessment opportunity is, and then an outline of what items students have to hit or have to discuss in order to obtain full marks for this or part marks. And so it's a very good resource for instructors and students to understand what their expectations are when responding to case-based solutions.
So here's an example of a type of case you'll find in the collection of one of the 28 cases. So this is an audit case, and in the audit case, the student is going to take on the role of a CPA, and they're going to be as part of an audit engagement team, and they're going to be reporting directly to the partner. And the partner is going to outline several requireds, which are going to be where the student is going to have to answer throughout the case. So an example of one of the requireds will the partner will ask the student, the CPA, to complete an audit planning memo. So in that, the student is expected to go through the risk material in the statement, analyzing both the inherent and control risks. They're going to be expected to calculate materiality and linking it back to the users of the case. And they're also going to have to go through the audit approach. Is it a substantive-based approach, control-based approach? Is there any scope limitations, any independence issues in the case? Another type of required is a student is going to have to analyze and use audit procedures to audit the high-risk financial statement accounts. So the partner is going to ask the CPA, the member of the team, to only look at the high-risk financial statement line items. So the student is going to be required to analyze those areas. What's the account we're testing? What's the assertion we're testing? And why are we testing this assertion? What risk are we addressing? And what are the steps in order to test this specific account? Another type of required would be the client is going to ask the engagement team to identify any potential internal control weaknesses. So the student is going to be required, as they read through the case, to identify areas where there's a control deficiency. And the student is going to be required to say, what's the issue of the control? What's the implication? Why is this an issue? And then what's the recommendation? And then the final required in this case is going to be control-based testing. So the company is going to have functioning controls in place where the partner is going to ask the staff, the student, to analyze and test those controls. So the student is going to have to read the case, find the controls, say what the control is, what assertion are we testing, what's the control looking to achieve, and how do we test that control. So speaking from my own experience and the audit courses that I do teach at York University, I find with my students, the biggest disconnect I have is I have students who have practical experience in audit and who have worked public accounting. And then I have students who do not have practical experience in working audit and public accounting. So I find when I teach theory in audit, it's fantastic, but I find there's a gap between the students who have practical experience and the ones who do not have practical experience. So the goal of the casebook is to allow those students who do not have practical experience in audit to bring them real life case-based scenarios to allow them to analyze these scenarios and understand assurance in audit in a real life setting. So another case example, and this one is a financial accounting case. Okay, it's one of the more intermediate financial accounting cases. This case really focuses in on capital assets. So the case, in the case, the client is purchasing a piece of land. So the first issue is initially recognizing that piece of land. First off, what's the primary intention on the purchase of the land? Is it capital or is it inventory? Also, the costs incurred to get that asset ready for use, which are capitalized, which are expensed. Another issue is the subsequent measurement of this piece of land. Is the client going to be using the cost model or the revaluation model? And the student is going to be expected to analyze both and then conclude. Another type of issue is on another piece of capital asset in the case. There's an impairment issue. So the student is going to have to analyze what is the indicator of impairment and how do we test for impairment on this asset. And then another type of capital asset issue you can expect to see is how are we going to amortize the capital assets, the one that are depreciating, that we are depreciating. What amortization methods are we going to use? And the student is going to be expected to perform a calculation and to conclude on the financial statement impact.
We also have financial accounting cases that have a finance focus as well as a tax focus. So in these types of cases, we might have a ton of financial accounting issues on the income statement, for example, revenue recognition. We might have a going concern assessment where, the company has experienced a period of negative financial results and the student is required to assess whether they're meeting their debt obligations, whether they're meeting their debt covenants, whether the company is going to keep operating in the future, or if there's a risk that the company will essentially go bankrupt and no longer be a going concern. And then, the finance component would be something along the lines of perhaps assessing an investment opportunity or recommending financing solutions. An example that I've done in my classes is when I teach investment assessment or investment planning, I'll go through a DCF model with my students. And so I work in finance, I work in mergers and acquisitions. So on a day-to-day basis, I am looking at some sort of financial model and I'm very familiar with the ins and outs and the complexities of financial model. So because I've seen it so much and I do it so often, oftentimes or sometimes I forget to put myself back into the mind of a student who is looking at this for the first time, right? And I forget sometimes to explain little nuances that maybe I overlook because I'm just so accustomed to doing them. So I did an example of a DCF with my students and I said, okay, does anyone have any questions? And I got blank stares, maybe some nods in the classroom, no indications that students really did not understand how to do a DCF. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to pull out a DCF case and we're going to do it together as a class just to test your understanding. And so we had a class discussion as students were building their own DCF models, I heard a lot of, hey, how do I do this? Like, what does this number mean? Where do I put this again? Right. And so it involved like a lot of class discussion, a lot of collaboration between the students, and also allowed students to recognize where the gaps in their understanding of the technical or the theoretical component that I taught was, and allowed them to really, in other words, understand what they didn't know so that they could ask questions to really take ownership of their learning and ensure that if they got a DCF model on an exam, or they had to do one in their first few years of professional services or their professional careers, they would know what to look out for, and they would know how to categorize all of the different information that clients, or in this case our case, gave us. And so again, just to reiterate, I think cases are a really great way for students to assess themselves, and also for the instructor to take a step back and really evaluate the way that they're teaching technical knowledge. And I really do encourage involving as many case examples as possible, especially when covering such technical content that sometimes overwhelms students. Because if you throw too much at students at once, sometimes they just kind of want to get through the class, right? They're just like nodding at you, and you don't actually know if they're nodding at you because they understand it, or if they're nodding at you because they want to go home. And so I think a case really helps you kind of discern what students understand from what they don't. So if you've never used a case before, or maybe if you have, but not a comprehensive case like those in our casebook, one of the authors will be available for questions, will be available to run you through tutorials on how to best integrate cases into your classroom. We're very open to doing this, and we're very collaborative and willing to work collaboratively with you to make sure that you're getting the most out of the casebook to enhance your class environment, your classroom dynamics, and most importantly, to provide as much value as possible for our students. Introducing cases to the classroom enhances both student understanding and the effectiveness of delivery of content. And we hope you can see, the various examples that we've illustrated here of how cases really emphasize the necessity of going beyond the technical and going beyond just like the numbers aspect that people often associate with accounting, to really try to focus on adding value and providing solutions by honing those critical thinking skills and those problem-solving skills in students that are what's going to set them apart from being simply accounting majors to really world-class accounting professionals. Today, we're also joined by Bartosz Amersky, who is our wonderful panelist. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Bartosz has over 15 years of audit and accounting experience in public and private sectors. He has over 12 years of experience teaching auditing and accounting for CP Ontario, York University, Ryerson University, and the University of of Toronto, where he received recognition and awards for excellence in teaching and creating a positive learning environment for students. Bartosz is also a contributing author to Auditing, the Art and Science of Assurance Engagements, a widely used university textbook in audit courses. Bartosz holds a CPA designation and a Master's of Law degree. So Bartosz, over to you.
No,
thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Good, that's excellent. So yes, thank you for the introduction. I teach in the fourth year, and I also teach in the graduate program at the university level. And I get students from third year, and usually during the first class, I'll pose them a question. I'll ask them, hey, a lot of you are pursuing to become professional accountants. That's what you want to be. What do you think accountants actually do? And based on the sort of courses that they have completed so far, a lot of them describe to me that they're going to become bookkeepers because they've been taught, in financial accounting journal entries. And really, they don't, especially for young people with programs where there is no co-op for young students, they really are struggling to understand what CPAs actually do. And that's why I decided, already several years ago to introduce into my course, actually in all my courses, cases, because, really cases are simplified scenarios that CPAs encounter, or professional accountants encounter in their day-to-day lives in different roles. And even with that, students struggle. We're going to be doing these cases, so they usually ask, okay, why are we doing these cases? We thought that we're going to be bookkeepers. And I tell them, well, really, what you are going to become is you're going to become a business doctor. Okay, people have money problems or businesses have problems, and now they're going to come to you for advice. Okay, and through cases, I'm able to show you some of the types of problems that professional accountants help people deal with, just like a medical doctor. So then I kind of, usually tell them, hey, if you would have listened to your parents and gone to medical school, then I wouldn't be showing you here accounting cases or audit cases, but rather, if you wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon, I'll probably pull up X-rays and medical records of a hypothetical or an actual case of a patient who was involved in, let's say, a motorcycle accident, right? And then we're going to work on that case, and I'm going to walk you through how I would respond as a medical orthopedic surgeon. But you're not a doctor, you are into accounting. Great. So here are the different types of scenarios, and communicated to you through cases that let's go and break it down, and let me teach you and show you the different types of problems that CPA encounter. And that brings me to the second important point. I kind of find that the students that get to my fourth-year classes in the graduate program, they've been taught to the tool. Okay, we're teaching them about all these different tools that accountants have. Okay, we're teaching them, hey, this is how you do an NPV analysis. Hey, this is how you assess risk in audit. Hey, this is the types of journal entries that you do in financial accounting. Great, great, great. But we don't teach them to the problem. And it is cases that describe the actual problems that accountants encounter into day-to-day life. And it makes such a big difference when you actually say, remember the tools that we taught you? Well, here's actually the problem that these tools are used for. And students, take a great leap. It's almost like, these cases help them put everything together. Now it's like, oh, now I understand why I was studying this in finance. Oh, now I get it why I was studying this in management accounting. And you sort of bring it together. A lot of these cases don't only cover one of the competency areas, one of the areas, let's say assurance, but there's integration. So you'll have financial accounting with managerial accounting as well. But bottom line, at the end of the day, professional accountants sell or generate advice. Okay, we have different roles and people come to us with business problems for advice. So cases is a great way of helping students develop sort of a way of creating that advice. That's a simple way of putting it. And advice is delivered in written format to clients. So through cases and through the writing part, students sort of, I teach them, I also teach a case writing course in their undergrad that helps to prepare students for the cases in the professional program, the CPA program here in Ontario. And in that so in that situation, that helps them improve their writing skills, how to structure a response that then your client can understand. So we work on that as well. So that advice creating workshop, how to put it together. The other part where I do use cases, there's two more areas, is presentation. Okay, even though you have now prepared a well-written report to your client that communicates the advice that you have, prepared for that client. Now you need to be able to lift some of the key points from your written report and communicate them to your client verbally. And that's the good part for presentations, where I also use cases. And the last part is for group discussion. You may have one way of approaching a problem that's prepared in the case, but it's really great to see the different, the diverse perspective once you open up a problem that's presented in the case to class discussion, and you see the different, and you hear the different perspectives that students have, and they're kind of, and it's a great learn. It creates a really great learning environment because you get to hear, actually, even sometimes I learn as well, but from what students have to say, because I had a certain way of that I would go and approach and try to solve the problem in the case, but then I hear something different. So pretty much those are the three ways that I use cases in my classroom. It really helps to teach to the problem, not to the tool. One example, last example I'm going to give you, I have sort of had I was lucky here to get some of the cases from the calculators case book and use them in the classroom. one scenario, we were talking about a situation or a tool a student would have learned in an audit class is the emphasis of matter paragraph in the audit report. But it'll be okay, you memorize that, in a certain situation, there's the audit report, we would add this paragraph. But it was through a case that students actually now were presented with a problem that an external auditor would face to now actually decide to add that additional section to an audit report, right? And once again, teaching to the problem instead of just teaching to the tool. So anyhow, that's sort of overall how I use cases and have been using them for several years now. I'll hand it back to you now, Marc and Alexandra.
All right, thanks everyone for your wonderful presentations. At this point, we're going to open up the question and answer period. So just as a reminder, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can submit questions anonymously if you wish. We'll just give everyone a few minutes to think of and type out their questions. I know that our authors and panelists are eager to answer any questions you may have. While we're waiting for any questions to come on in, I can chat a little bit more about how you can obtain a copy of your book. I know I mentioned earlier that there is a discount code for our website, and I'll pull that up at the end as well. But if you are an instructor who's perhaps interested in considering the book for your course, if you go to the Canadian Scholars website on our Contact Us page, you'll be able to get in touch with your publisher's representative, where they can send you a complimentary review copy. And they're also happy to discuss any aspects of the book as well. And of course, if you're looking to just purchase a copy for yourself, you may get that on the Canadian Scholars website as well.
I think we have a question from Alexandra.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I can step in and happy to answer that after implementing cases. So the number one thing, there was a shift in the way students thought about accounting and becoming a professional accountant. And that was the most sort of drastic change. Instead of coming there and trying to memorize, they're like, oh, so these accountants actually face real life problems. And the second one was there were more class discussion, like people actually got to know one another, not only spend time texting on a phone, but actually speaking to one another, because it's, I would present the problem, and it's a fourth-year course, students are a little bit more mature, and I would say, hey, okay, you guys have 10 minutes, talk about the problem, and and then I'm gonna give you after 10 minutes or 15 minutes, depends on the case. Sometimes I break the case into chunks, so we'll only work on one problem, on one of the problems out of the list of several problems that is in the case, and I would say, okay, in 15 minutes, prepare to do a presentation of that topic, and then they would present. So they have to chat, get themselves organized, identify someone who's going to speak. Usually, I would have a couple of follow-up questions. So I would say those are the two most drastic changes that I found in the classroom dynamics. One, more conversations and collaboration among students, and second, students starting to think about the real-life problems that they have to deal with and not only focus on the tools. Marc, Alexandra, anything else to add from your experience?
Yeah, I can speak to that question. It's a very good question. So I think from mine, I mentioned it in my presentation, I found with students, the biggest disconnect I find is when teaching audit courses is you have students who have practical experience in audit and those who do not have practical experience. So those students who actually have had internships working in public accounting in the audit division, and then you have students who have yet to experience that. So I find when I teach the theory and when we're applying that theory, students who have the practical experience are able to answer the questions more effectively than the students who don't. And that's just because for those who worked in audit before, there's one aspect of the theory, which is great, but then actually working in audit and applying that theory, you actually just have to do it. Audit, you learn an audit on the job by actually being immersed on an audit team, on an engagement at the client side or whatnot. So I find with the cases, it bridges that gap, and it allows the students who don't have the practical experience to be able to put themselves in the role of a CPA on an audit engagement and be able to analyze issues and be able to conduct an audit planning memo with real life case-based scenarios. And this helps bridge that gap, and it better helps the students who don't have the practical experience to better understand the theoretical concepts.
Yeah, and just from my perspective, I find that it allows students to just become more comfortable asking questions, right? So like having, you know, a technical discussion, students might not want to, they might feel like they're the only person in the class that doesn't understand something. So they might be like hesitant to raise their hand and ask a question. But when we're doing a case discussion and we're taking up a case in class, you know, students will say, I don't understand this, I don't understand that, or give perspectives that are correct, or maybe you're missing something. So it offers more of an opportunity for a collaborative classroom environment. And what I've seen is it actually encourages students, while I'm taking up technical content the next time we meet in class, to ask questions proactively, because they know they're going to be tested in a case that we're going to do at the end of class, or that we're going to do in the following class, or maybe on an assessment. And then also just encourages them to really take more ownership of making sure that they understand the content as it's being presented. So, coming up to me at break to ask questions, or staying behind after class and asking questions then. So it really has just, in my perspective, allowed students to, first of all, like become less shy asking questions about technical knowledge, and also just take more of like an active role in their learning, of just making sure that they are really having that strong technical background and not feeling alone in maybe not knowing certain aspects at 100% the first time that they've ever seen some technical knowledge, which I know is an unreasonable expectation, but sometimes students place those expectations on themselves. So I think cases just really allow that content to, come back down to like a palatable place.
Thanks so much for that. I think if there are no more questions, we'll get started with wrapping things up. I also want to mention that this event is recorded and will be distributed to everyone after the event. And if you have any questions for our authors or panelists, you'll be able to reach out then, and I can provide their contact information to you. Just give me one moment. I'm going to reshare my screen. Okay, I just want to remind everyone that there is a discount code available for calculators and cash. So it is CAC launch, and this will give you 20% off any purchase made on the Canadian Scholars website until June 17, 2024. Just want to say thank you so much to everyone for attending today's webinar, and special thanks to our authors and panelists who worked very hard to get this event ready for you today. So again, thanks so much. If you're in Canada, have a happy long weekend, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much as well.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.